3 weeks until the 2013 NFL Draft. I feel like I say it's like the countdown. Should we have like a countdown clock that has the days, hours, minutes, seconds? No, I'll just tell you every day. Today, it's 3 weeks. Tomorrow, it'll be 2 weeks and 6 days. And so it goes. So it goes for the Cardinals. I wonder, did they tell Carson Palmer before he agreed to join the team that they were going to lose one of their best defensive players for 25% of the 2013 season? Fair disclosure. I think Carson Palmer should have known that because one day after, the Cardinals celebrated the fact that they won't be quite as far to the back of the pack in the NFC West with the arrival of Carson Palmer. They now have let the world know, the NFL made the announcement technically, that Darrell Washington, star linebacker, only 3 years in the league, already had a long-term extension. He's going to be gone 4 games to start the season. And anytime we hear 4 games out of the blue for a guy, we assume it's performance-enhancing drugs, but it's not. We have to be clear on that. It's a different policy. Now, under the performance-enhancing drug policy, 1 failure, 1 mistake, 1 missed test, 1 failed test, 1 positive test, 1 violation, you get a 4-game suspension, up to and including the dreaded non-human urine, which I guess you'd better hope was, you know, a PED violation. Otherwise, you got a real problem. With this specific case, Darrell Washington, it's a violation of the substance abuse policy, and you don't get a 4-game suspension under the substance abuse policy for a one-shot violation. You have to have multiple violations. Now, in fairness, and I'm going to be writing more about this, I've been gathering some information. Everybody's hush-hush about it, obviously. This apparently isn't the classic case of a guy, for example, this isn't Washington, this is an example, a guy smoking marijuana, testing positive once, being put in stage 1 of the program, testing positive again, being put in stage 2, being fined 4 game checks, testing positive again, and getting the 4-game suspension. Maybe a little more complicated than that with Darrell Washington. I'm going to be writing about it later today, but it's possible that in this case, and also in other cases, it wasn't a positive test as much as it's a failure to comply with the stringent requirements the NFL imposes on a guy when it's time to test. Because once you're in the program, you can be tested multiple times a month. I think the number's up to 20 times a month. You need to check that. If you miss a test, if you've got just some screw-up, some glitch, you don't get there in time, it's treated as a positive and you go to the next level. So either way, Darrell Washington is now 1 more positive test or failure to show up for a test or any other violation away from a 1-year suspension. My understanding is the Cardinals are still firmly behind him, and he remains one of the best young players in the National Football League. And it is important to point out there was no steroid or any other performance-enhancing drug involved in this. This is substance abuse, recreational stuff that, frankly, I don't know why the NFL cares about, because typically it's something a guy is doing on his own time. Well, something that Clay Matthews and Aaron Rodgers are doing on their own time is, via their agents, negotiating new contracts. And all reports indicate that this is close to being done for both guys, Clay Matthews and Aaron Rodgers, getting new contracts. And the Packers can afford it. They've got over $17 million in cap space for this year, and they typically don't spend a lot of money on any one player. I'm surprised they're going to spend a lot on Clay Matthews. Now, I saw Adam Schefter on ESPN today saying he'll be the highest paid linebacker in NFL history. I'll believe it when I see it. And I'll believe it when I have a chance to break down. Scared me for a second. I thought he already had a new contract. That's his existing deal from when he was drafted back in 2009. He's entering the final year of that 5-year rookie deal. I want to see the new money, the old money, the guarantees, because, look, Paul Kruger got a pretty good deal as an outside linebacker, but Terrell Suggs is a linebacker. Terrell Suggs, as far as I can recall, is the high watermark for linebackers right now in the NFL. But we're going to have to compare the final deal to other deals. Could be a little puffery that tends to come from the player's camp when you hear highest paid linebacker in NFL history. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm more likely to believe that Aaron Rodgers will be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history because right now we know the high watermark is $20.1 million. That's Joe Flacco just barely getting beyond the annual average for Drew Brees' contract from last year of $20 million per year, both on a 6-year deal. Aaron Rodgers, widely believed to exceed that by at least $1 million a year. Most recent reports indicated that the Packers want to pay him $21 million total on average. Rodgers wants $23 million total on average. We'll see how that works out. Now, Rodgers, to his credit, has made no noise whatsoever about any unhappiness with his contract, even as more and more quarterbacks get these big money deals that make Rodgers' contract look minuscule in comparison. He's going to make roughly $10 million a year over the next 2 years. You've got Tony Romo making a total average of $17 million per year over 7 years. You've got Peyton Manning in the neighborhood of $20 million. You've got Drew Brees at $20 million. You've got Joe Flacco north of $20 million. Aaron Rodgers should be right up there with the best of them, and he'll probably be higher. And I remember hearing a couple weeks ago that this is going to be one of those moments where it sets the bar to a point where it's going to take several years for anyone to catch it. And one of the problems is the cap numbers for quarterbacks. They keep going higher and higher. The salary cap isn't going up at the same rate. We're seeing more and more teams who have a quarterback with a huge piece of the salary cap devoted to him. And then you just make do with the rest of the cap space to try to put a team around him. But it's a quarterback-driven league. It continues to skew toward the passing game. If you've got a franchise quarterback, you're in position to contend year in and year out. You don't have to win the Super Bowl every year. You just have to contend every year. Your fan base doesn't disengage by Halloween if you're a contender every year. And yeah, you're going to lose in January. It may be 8 years between Super Bowl appearances or longer, at least Super Bowl wins like the Patriots have seen. But the Patriots contend every year because they have a franchise quarterback. The teams with the franchise quarterbacks seem to contend every year. Finally, the last word from the NFL, apparently, or at least for now, regarding the "do you like girls" questions that were posed to various incoming players, i.e. job applicants, during the scouting combine. Mike Freeman of CBS Sports reported earlier today that the NFL will take no action against any of the teams that were involved in this. Now, it's not a surprise because a couple of weeks ago, Judah Batista in the New York Times reported that the NFL's position on this was that any inappropriate questions that may have been asked during these job interviews weren't really part of the job interview. Which, if effective, hey, look, I used to defend companies who were charged with discrimination. I also pursued claims against them on behalf of individuals later in my legal career. That's a great ironclad defense. Sorry, no, all that inappropriate stuff we said during the job interview, that really wasn't part of the job interview. See, that's a subset of the job interview that really wasn't. It's ridiculous. And this entire process has been ridiculous. You shouldn't be asking those questions of incoming applicants. And the teams who did it should be punished. And it's very easy to figure out, if the NFL really wanted to, who asked those questions. But see, the NFL so frequently is driven by the PR fallout. And the NFL has no reason to start fining teams and making a big deal out of something that just kind of died on its own after it made a little bit of a splash in the media. But the more you keep this going, the more you look into it, and if you punish teams and fine teams and take away draft picks, which would be the most appropriate punishment given the context, they're trying to figure out how you're going to use your draft picks. If you're doing that inappropriately, you lose your draft picks, or at least one or two of them. But by doing that, it makes the story bigger, and that's what the NFL doesn't want. Now, sometimes the NFL has no choice. Sometimes the NFL wants to make a story big because it advances other agendas, like the bounty scandal last year. The NFL wanted to change the culture. The NFL wanted to make an example out of somebody. And the NFL wanted to, in a roundabout way, influence the pool of jurors who are eventually going to sit on the concussion lawsuits that the NFL really does care about the safety of players. But in this case, the NFL had no reason to keep this going because the NFL never has to worry about anyone suing the NFL for these kinds of questions. Because by the time you get to the scouting combine, you are a product of the football machine. You are desensitized to any talk that could be remotely homophobic, and you just want to play football. And you're not going to step aside from that machinery and say, I'm going to sue somebody for asking me an inappropriate question. No, you just want to play football. So the NFL knows they're never going to face real accountability for this, so why make a big deal over something that they can just brush under the rug? That's the bottom line, and that's the end of the first segment of this show. When we come back, Corey Chavis, good friend, former NFL player, DraftNasty.com. You've seen him on Pro Football Talk on NBC Sports Network. You've heard him on here several times. We've got to check in with him. We're 3 weeks away from the draft, as I've already said 5 or 6 times this show. And then, look, there's been all this talk about Geno Smith, the West Virginia quarterback. What kind of a player is he? What kind of a guy is he? Decided to go to one of the guys who may know as well as anyone. West Virginia Mountaineers play-by-play announcer Tony Caridi of the Mountaineer Sports Network joining us. Good friend of mine, known him for a long time, been on his show. I get to turn the tables on him. He'll be on segment 3. Before that, Corey Chavis. Before that, we'll take a break. We'll be right back. This is PFT Live. Check out Pro Football Talk on NBC Sports Network weeknights at 5 p.m. Eastern and PFT Live weekdays at noon Eastern on NBCSports.com.